So let's go through some of the muscles of facial expression, also known as the mimetic muscles. As you may recall from our embryology, the muscles of facial expression all are derived from the pharyngeal arch 2 and are supplied by cranial nerve 7. Now, a couple of things to be aware of as you think about the facial muscles is that there's a high degree of variation of these muscles. The definitions for them, their locations are fairly standard, but how they actually appear on the models versus on the cadavers can be pretty variable to some degree or other. So I will try to give you an idea of where these muscles are found on the models that we have in our lab. And I think that in generally those will serve you well as you understand the placement and position of each of these muscles. And then when you start studying them on the cadaver, recognize you're not going to see them to this degree or clarity as you will on the model. And also there will be some of those variations where you just have to kind of make your best judgment call. The other thing to be aware of on this particular model is that one side of the model here is designated as kind of a superficial representation of these muscles, and the other side over here are going to be some of the deeper muscles here. The other distinction is that I'll try to make is the difference between muscles of facial expression and muscles of mastication. In other words, those muscles that, the mastication muscles are the ones that move the jaws during chewing. Okay, so we'll begin at the top part of the model up here. This first muscle here is the frontalis muscle. When we talk about the organization of the scalp and next week, we'll talk more about the frontalis muscle and its role in the is called the epicranius, which is a combination of muscle and tendon that goes over the top of the head. But for now, it's just we'll just stick with straight identification. So the frontalis is this muscle here, just lying over top the frontal bone. Then as we kind of move more towards the nose region, and here you won't be able to see this too easily, but there'll be some muscle fibers that will come out along the side here, coming from the medial portion of the brow ridge here, okay? And those muscle fibers will be called the corrugator because of the what they do to the skin in this region. When the muscle contracts, it will cause ripples or corrugations in the brow or furrowing of the brow. So the muscle responsible for doing that is going to be found along here. It's just a small muscle. It's probably deep to this one here. It's probably not shown very well on this particular model. Then as we go right toward the midline here, you see this one coming up along the bridge of the nose and up into the upper part of the anterior part of the scalp here. This is called the procerus. Okay, just that little muscle there. Then as we go to the side, this whole circular muscle surrounding the eye is the orbicularis oculi. And there are two defined parts to it, this lateral or this more outer portion here, which is the palpebral portion, and then the part here close to the eyelids is the palpebral portion. The outer portion out here is the orbital portion of our orbicularis oculi. Then we see the nasalis, which is these muscle fibers coming up over the nose in this fashion. That's the nasalis. And then we come to a kind of a harder one that's a little bit trickier to identify, and a lot of confusion on this one that you'll hear in the lab sometimes with TAs or other students kind of misidentifying it. And it's called the levator labii superioris allocanese. And it's this long, slender muscle right here, closest to the nose. And, right there, just that little muscle there. That's the levator labii superioris allocanese. It's a long name for a little muscle. And there's a mnemonic for remembering that. And the mnemonic is, little ladies snore all night. So little ladies snore all night. And this helps remember both the name itself, but also it helps you remember that snoring associated kind of with closest to the nose or the nostril region here. So most of us think of snoring as being kind of a nasal function. Okay, so little ladies snore all night. Levator labii superioris alicae nasae. Then as we move lateral to that, we come into this muscle here and here. And this muscle is the levator labii superioris. Okay, and it's this one and this one. And then as we go lateral to that one, we encounter the zygomaticus minor, and then to the side of that, the zygomaticus major, these two fibers that you see here. Okay, now one of the things that can be a little bit confusing on the levator labii superioris, and this again is kind of a definitional part or an idea, and that is that many people kind of describe all of this whole muscle here as levator labii superioris, and that this is the angular portion, the alicae, and then this is the major body of it, and then you have a lateral head, which is actually the zygomaticus minor. So don't be surprised if, as you read through different anatomy books, that they may describe it that way. But for our purposes, we're going to define these as separate muscles: the levator labii superioris alicae nasae, the levator labii superioris, these two muscles, zygomaticus minor, and then zygomaticus major here. As we continue to go lateral from there, we see these muscle fibers going immediately lateral from the corner of the mouth or the angle of the mouth. This is the risorius. And then we have the circular muscles actually going around the mouth itself. This is the orbicularis oris. These muscle fibers surrounding the mouth. Then we have the levator anguli oris. Now I'll show it to you on both sides here. That's this muscle right here coming into the corner of the mouth. Notice that it's underneath the zygomaticus minor and kind of comes in, blending the fibers of the zygomaticus major, but it's that one right there. And if we go to the opposite side, you can see this muscle here coming down deep to the other muscles. So that's levator anguli oris. Beneath that down here, we see the depressor anguli oris. This is the one that draws the mouth corners down. This is sometimes also called the triangularis. And then just medial to that is the depressor labii inferioris. And then just here is the mentalis. This set of muscles there, that's the mentalis. The other muscle that you need to be able to identify is not visible on this model, and that is the platysma. Platysma is a sheet-like muscle that arises from down here near the collarbone, extends up along the neck, and then inserts in along the border of the mandible along here. It's seen in the lab on the large models, the large head models, but it's not visible on this particular model here. So this is, that will be the platysma. Okay, and it's again a fairly broad muscle across here. Very thin though, it's almost paper thin on most individuals. So even on the cadavers, it's sometimes difficult to see. While we're here, let me just point out one other thing, which is this branching of the facial nerve. So see, coming out through here near the angle of the jaw, passing over the ramus of the mandible here, you can see this nerve coming out and then splitting to different parts of the face. This is the facial nerve. It distributes out to the face by 5 major branches that then supply the different muscles of facial expression. One of the ways that we know that this is the facial nerve is that it's passing right through the parotid salivary gland, this pinkish structure here. Part of that has been dissected away to show this nerve coming out through it, or passing right through the body of the parotid salivary gland. And so that relationship helps us know that this is indeed the facial nerve because of its relationship in tunneling through the parotid gland. So this would be the parotid salivary gland. It's this fairly large salivary gland, and here's the parotid salivary duct coming across here. Oh, One other thing maybe to just make sure you're aware of is this muscle right here forming kind of the wall of the cheek. That's the buccinator. I think that's on your terms list. Okay. The buccinator is also a muscle of facial expression. Here it is on the other side where all the other superficial muscles have been stripped away. Okay, that's the buccinator, and it is a muscle of facial expression, not a muscle of mastication. So we've missed the other muscles of mastication, which you'll cover later on, like the temporalis and the masseter and medial and lateral pterygoids. But for now, you've got the majority of these muscles of facial expression.